Oh dear, it looks like things are starting to get a little bit messy. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And man, these transfers are protracted, and yeah, but I guess by the very nature of the fact that they're taking so long, dictates that it's going to get a little bit messy, isn't it? So there is developments on the Garnacho and the Xavi Simons news, and this has just been really interesting transfer window in general, isn't it, man? Even from not just a Chelsea perspective, like look at the Newcastle with HIJACK stuff and the Liverpool triangle that's going on over there. You know, you've got Everton going in for the likes of Jack Grealish, Sunderland really going in for desperately trying to stay in as well. There seems to be, and even Burnley, man. Burnley spent obviously upwards of 40 mil on 2 Chelsea players. I think we're going to see a really, really interesting Premier League season, man. I'm probably going to do another video on it just before the season starts about how wild I think this Premier League is going to be. But there's lots of big stories, even from outside England. Do you know what I mean? Is Donnarumma's just won the Champions League and gotten to the final of the Club World Cup with PSG and is a really, really good goalkeeper. But he has been booted out and Chevalier's been brought in over there and he is on the market now, and likes of Man United are looking at going in big for him. Do you know what I mean? Even stuff with City, like we're going to talk a little bit about City today, but City are selling Savinho. Do you know what I mean? They're looking at, I can't remember the lad's name, but they just brought in a midfielder like 6 months ago who they're also looking at getting out now. It's like, this is a wild transfer window, man. There seems to be something in the air, and we're going to talk about it a little bit today. But before we get into it, guys, if you are enjoying the content and would like to see more, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video. Subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I am on that race to 1,000 subs. And if you don't fancy doing any of those, just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so let's start with the Garnacho stuff, right? The Garnacho stuff. So, as per football.london today, there has been a report that Garnacho has offered an ultimatum to Man United about this transfer, right? So obviously it's been going on for a little while. I've started talking about it recently. I put it off for a while, but the more it is looking likely, the more I started to talk about Garnacho. And he has put in an ultimatum today saying it's Chelsea or nothing. So the balance of power between Garnacho and Man United at the moment is Garnacho is, you would have thought the power that Man United has over Garnacho, is if you don't go, we're just going to bench you for the season. Do you know what I mean? But it seems like Garnacho is calling their bluff to say, I know you need to sell me because of you're buying Mbermo and you're buying Matheus Cunha and you're buying, obviously they've just got Benjamin Sesko in, like they've spent serious money and they're maybe still looking at spending more as well. They're in for the lad Kuleba, I can't exactly remember his name, but the lad from Brighton, they're supposedly maintaining interest in Donnarumma as well. So Garnacho is very of the opinion, it's like, I know you guys need to sell me. I know you guys don't want me hanging around. And he is now supposedly putting his foot down and saying it's Chelsea or nothing. He doesn't want to go anywhere else, which I guess for all of the attitude stuff we've been talking about Garnacho, it's like, no, it doesn't look good. Do you know what I mean? No player trying to exercise player power over their club ever looks good. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, he probably would have a lot of other suitors. I imagine that, we haven't really heard about many, but maybe it's just because the message from Garnacho from the off has been, I want to go to Chelsea. And that might have happened in the last window. So as far as the negotiations go, at the beginning of it all, Man United wanted 70 mil. Absolutely was never going to happen. Supposedly now they've dropped that down to 50, which is 50 mil profit on the books for them. And we don't want to pay that either. I imagine sub 40 with add-ons is where we're going to go. So we might end up with like a 35 to 40 initial outlay and maybe a couple of millions in add-ons, depending on what happens. I do feel like this one's going to go through, man. I feel like this and the Xavi Simons deal are going to go through, to be fair. We'll talk about Xavi Simons in a bit. But it's just getting a bit messy, isn't it? So I am torn in the Garnacho thing. Not as a player, completely. As a player, I've reconciled my feelings about that, and I've really, really digged into his stats, and I can see 100% how he could be a good addition to the team. And just in isolation, just looking at his stats over the last 4 seasons since he kind of made his debut at Man United, his returns gotten better every single season, and that has been in a Man United team that have been, their highest finish was 3rd. They did pretty well. It was Solskjaer, wasn't it? Was the manager at that point, and they have been dropping off since then with an 8th and a 15th finish. And even with that decline of their league form, Garnacho's performance has been increasing and going up. So despite being in a really difficult situation at a club that's having a torrid time, his individual performance is literally getting better and better and better. So that's really promising, right? And, you know, whatever else we think about Garnacho, that's kind of the case. The thing I'm torn about is, do I like the fact that Garnacho is offering an ultimatum? Like I say, the instant kind of warning sign about that is he's trying to exercise player power, and we know a bit about that. Do you know what I mean? We, you know, in Abramovich era, do you know what I mean? We saw a lot of players, you know, make themselves kind of difficult and try and, you know, managers lost their jobs over it. And do you know what I mean? There was a few times where player power wasn't exactly a great thing. So I don't love the idea that we're seeing that. And it is, again, existing in this Xavi Simons thing. Not quite as much as the Garnacho thing. He seems to be really, really putting his foot down. But the positive of it is, supposedly, if the reports are to be believed, obviously I must always caveat it with that. If that is the case, then he is doing it in order to move to Chelsea, and he is not interested in going anywhere else at all. So what that tells you, if it's true, is he is going to come and give absolutely everything. He's going to do what he's told. He's going to get on with the team. He's going to play whatever position he's being told to, and he's not necessarily going to give us attitude. Why would you cut off the option to go to any other club other than Chelsea if you're going to come in and try and cause trouble? And I've maintained this before. There wasn't really any noise about issues from Garnacho until Amorim came in, and we were linked with him last time. Do you know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think this is indicative of Garnacho having an attitude problem. Chelsea have done background checks on him as well, and apparently that's not an issue. As the story grows and develops, it really is starting to just look like Garnacho is really, really unhappy at Man United and the way that things have gone there for him. So that's the negative. And like I say, the positive is like he really wants to come to Chelsea, man. So we could have a really, really good player on our hands here. And you know, obviously a lot of Chelsea fans, myself included, were initially quite concerned. It's like, oh, what does this mean for people like Tyreek George? But trying to look through my personal vision, about how I really like seeing academy players break through. At the end of the day, if they thought Tyreek George was as good as Alejandro Garnacho, or could be in this upcoming season, then we wouldn't even be talking about this, would we? I know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's preseason and whatever, but he's looked a bit different in the 2 preseason games, man. He looks like he's trying a little bit too hard, and that isn't a bad thing in itself. But what I think Tyreek George needs, and what Alejandro Garnacho has already had, is lots of game time. This is where the difference lies, right? Tyreek George is like 19, probably close to 20 years old, if not already, and he hasn't had nearly as much game time and experience as Alejandro Garnacho has had. In an upcoming season with 4 competitions where we're going to want to win a trophy, we're going to want to do our best to go deep into the Champions League, and we're going to absolutely be shooting for the stars as far as the Premier League goes, Garnacho maybe hasn't had enough game time to say, okay, we think you can handle that pressure. And I feel the similar way about Josh Achiempong. But the difference there, Josh Achiempong has had more time and looks more ready to play a part and a role, but not the same kind of role that Garnacho is going to come in and play. Garnacho will come in and push Jamie Gittins for that spot. Do you know what I mean? The experience that they've both got, the numbers that they've both accrued over the last few years and where they are in their careers at the moment, it feels like it could be a bit of a straight shootout between Garnacho and Gittins, depending on what game it is. But with Tyreek George, it definitely feels like he'd be the understudy to Jamie Gittins rather than pushing Jamie Gittins for that spot. So like I say, I've reconciled it in my head. Do you know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things, with he is going to come, and a bit concerned about how it's going on and how messy it's getting. But at the end of the day, if this is all true and Garnacho only has eyes for Chelsea, that's not even necessarily an attitude problem, man. It's probably been made fully aware to him as well, like, there is no future for you at the club. That's the other thing. Do you know what I mean? The other side of that is, like, what has it been like for Garnacho at Man United since Ruben Amorim came in? He obviously played like a really, really big part in the Europa League and missed out on that Europa League final, and that's largely because of Amorim's preferred tactical setup. Like, I've gone through this a few times with the half tens behind the striker. Do you know what I mean? There isn't really a spot in Amorim's philosophy and system for a Garnacho type player unless he massively gets converted to another type of player, which will ultimately hurt some of his skills. But there's a spot in Maresca's team for exactly the type of winger that he is. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't love the fact that it's getting messy, but what keeps happening every day now, like Fabrizio Romano is coming out every single day at the moment and be like, Chelsea are negotiating he's obviously agreed personal terms with us already, and it is purely the money thing. Do you know what I mean? So Garnacho is now trying to put pressure on Man United to drop their asking price for him in order to make this move happen. And ultimately, it is probably in everyone's best interest for the move to happen soon. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't want Garnacho around the changing room at the moment, or, you know, even just having that shadow being cast over what they're trying to do and what they're trying to build at the moment with a new team, new system, new squad, all of that. You don't want a player like Garnacho hanging around and making things difficult, 100%. And Man United are going to need to get the money in ASAP. I don't think, you know, it could go to the wire, it could go to deadline day, but if what we're talking, I mean, we're never going to pay 50 million for him, man. Absolutely not. We will just not do that. Do you know what I mean? It is almost more likely that we'd just go in for another random player at the same sort of price rather than give in to Man United's 50 mil thing. Now, you know, if that happens, I'll eat my words or whatever. But, you know, I do think that ultimately we are going to be looking to in and around 40 million pounds for Garnacho. I think that he is putting pressure on Man United right now to make that happen. And hopefully it happens soon, man, because I just want to see the squad, man. I just want to see the squad. Do you know what I mean? I've got so many content plans about how we're going to look and how we can line up differently against different teams and, you know, loads of stuff that I want to get into, but I kind of want to hold fire until we've got a closer idea of what the team's looking like. So, yeah, that's it for the Garnacho stuff, and we'll move on to the Xavi Simons stuff, because the Xavi Simons stuff went kind of quiet for a while. You know, like I said this the other day, like a week or so ago, it seemed like it was going to happen tomorrow, and then all of a sudden he's out and back into the Red Bull Leipzig preseason squad, and, you know, things, you know, all of a sudden we're talking about, Chelsea are trying to get players involved, like Nkunku or this and that and the other. So the new news that has come out that might potentially complicate the Simons deal, but there is a caveat to this I will get onto in a minute, is supposedly Man City are throwing their oar in to this deal, putting their hat in the ring, saying we are interested in Xavi Simons. And, I mean, at any point, right, don't get me wrong, Man City aren't exactly coming off of their best season ever, and, you know, but they've still got, like, unbelievable players there. They've still got arguably the best manager in the world at their club. It is a very attractive proposition for a young player to go to a Man City at the moment. And, yeah, that'd be a bit of a worry, wouldn't it? Because I feel like they would probably be a bit less stingy in their negotiations if they really wanted him. Now, I think it's difficult with City, isn't it? Because what is still, although there's been some news about it, and when there's, you know, more concrete news comes out, we'll talk about it, but there are still the thing hanging over their head that they've got these charges, do you know what I mean? And what does that mean for them? Are they going to get points deducted? Are they going to have reduced squad sizes? Are they going to get relegated? Do you know what I mean? There's so many questions about the City thing at the moment. So I do feel if that wasn't happening, we'd probably be seeing City going in for bigger targets than they currently are. But if Xavi Simons is interested in Manchester City, that could pose a problem for us. Now, what else I've seen about this is supposedly similar to how, do you remember the Moises Caicedo thing with Liverpool, right? We were negotiating with Moises Caicedo for ages, and we got took to the cleaners by Brighton, man. They held out for the full amount, do you know what I mean? And I think the thing is, it wasn't even that we weren't willing to pay the full amount. It was just about the structure of it. We wanted to pay less up front and more in add-ons or whatever. And then Liverpool coming out of nowhere and match our bid. Bang, we'll pay all of it to you now. And it was a bit like, but very quickly, in the first couple of days of that happening, Caicedo came out and said, no, I've been spending this time negotiating with Chelsea. I want to go to Chelsea. I like the project, even though Liverpool was a really, really attractive proposition at that point. So maybe we're about, you know, looking at something similar with the Xavi Simons situation now. Xavi Simons has supposedly come out and said, no, I am still interested in going to Chelsea. Obviously, it's a very attractive project for any young player at the moment, isn't it? Because you know you're going to get chances, you know you're going to get game time. You are always beholden to the manager, but at the end of the day, because the manager is beholden to the project, do you know what I mean? It's not as straight a shootout in terms of the hierarchical structure as it is at Man City. No one is going to Pep at Man City and saying, we want you to play this guy, we want you to play this guy. Pep is saying, get me this guy, or I'm not playing this guy, or I'm not playing this guy. Do you know what I mean? Pep has definitely got a lot more power and control at Man City than Maresca does at Chelsea. So just from that, being a young player coming into Chelsea, being sold that project of young players getting chances and opportunities, that's going to be an attractive proposition, because you know that you're probably going to get chances, you know, even if the manager isn't, you know, a big fan or whatever, because you're being brought in. I'm not saying that Maresca has no power at all, but there is definitely a different power dynamic than there is between Pep and the Man City brass, right? So, yeah, again, it's just been dragging on for so long, man. It's just been dragging on for so long. Simons looks like a wicked player. I've talked about it a little bit, and I had a really good conversation with a guy in my comments today, in fact, at the time of releasing this. It's about, I released a video yesterday about us being in for Ronald Araujo, and how I think that, we're seeing a lot of injured players at the moment, and I think it has got something to do with the nature of the evolution of football, where there's so many games now. People are just playing all the time. And I think what we're starting to see is, like, a lot of other fans and stuff are like, Chelsea buying all these players, but there's not room for all of them. I think ultimately, with the growing level of games that there are, having thicker squads is going to be commonplace in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think maybe we're getting in front of it now with the financial model and buying young players. And, we haven't got a first 11 and a bench that are slightly less quality than the first 11, but able to come in and do a job. We are now starting to see a first 11 that looks really, really good, and 4 or 5 players on the bench that are as the same quality, if not better in some aspects, than the guys we've got in the first team. And it is largely going to depend on the tactical setup and what opponent we've got in front of us is going to dictate who gets the game time. So at the end of the day, if someone like João Pedro comes in and scores 20, 25 goals or whatever, he's going to get the game time. But there are some situations, and we have sort of seen it already. Liam Delap came on at the end of that AC Milan game and scored 2 goals. Because João Pedro was looking like he was struggling to get a foothold, although he scored that really early goal that was really good. Ultimately, he wasn't able to inject himself into that game as much as he has been into some of our others. So we bring in, and obviously we were playing against a 10-man AC Milan as well, which means that they are more compact and they are more defensive and a bit stodgy and stuff. So you bring on someone like Liam Delap all of a sudden, who's a bit of a bully, offers something a bit different, and all of a sudden things start to open up. He put the cross in for Estevao to claim that penalty, and he scored the goal assisted by Andre Santos at the end as well. So I think this is the future of what we're looking at in football, right? And to bring it back to Xavi Simons, like, Xavi Simons maybe sometimes will play alongside Cole Palmer. Maybe Xavi Simons will sometimes feature out on that left-hand side, and we'll see a Hato or a Cucurella play more of a byline role, so we can do that dual number 10 thing. I think that it is as much about tactical options and spreading out the minutes more than we have before, because there's so much football now, and we need to make sure that we're keeping everyone fit. So I do think it's a really, really, really interesting evolution that in football that we're seeing at the moment. And look, at the end of the day, maybe I'm completely wrong, and maybe that's not what's going to happen, but it looks like that's what Chelsea are building towards, right? With the multi-club model and stacking our team full of really, really impressive youngsters. And not just having like bench players and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And the academy is suffering at the moment. But another really interesting chat I had with another guy in my comments is, hopefully this means that we raise the bar of the academy as well. Maybe Tyreek George is getting towards the end of the last group of players that are going to struggle, and the likes of Antwi and Reggie Walsh, and do you know what I mean? These guys are going to come in and maybe push some of our first teamers, at a much earlier age, because we're looking for younger and younger and younger footballers. So I do think I just think it's interesting, man. I think it's fascinating, if I'm completely honest. But yeah, the transfer stuff is getting a bit messy. I hope that it is true about Xavi Simons saying, no, I'm going to do the Chelsea thing one way or another. Obviously, we've already got personal terms agreed with all of these players. I mean, and the thing is, that's going to always happen really quickly now, because we're offering mostly the same kind of thing to all of them. Do you know what I mean? Reasonably high contracts depending on where we are at the moment, if we're in the Champions League or whatever, and incentive-based things, which is really good. I love that. I've always kind of wanted that, man, because what we're going to start to see the end of soon, or we are starting to see the end of already, is the likes of, you remember Aubameyang at Arsenal, 300 grand a week, completely went off the boil. Ben Chilwell on 200k plus a week, but doesn't fit into the new system. So all of a sudden, we've just got this player. Do you know what I mean? I think Cucurella and Reece James are the last two that are on the not incentive-based contracts in the squad, and everyone else is now on these incentive-based contracts. And at the end of the day, if you want better pay, you've got to earn it, man. You've got to earn it. It becomes, no one's going to moan at the end of the day. If they're not playing well enough to get those incentives, then that squarely comes down to them. And it's not even necessarily because they're not getting chances, because there's going to be so many games that people will get opportunities. And instead of sitting on the bench for ages, we'll see more rotation in terms of sales and incomings. Do you know what I mean? If a player sits on the bench for a season and isn't happy with it, he'll go to the brass and be like, I'm not playing enough. And the brass will say, you haven't been playing well enough to get that game time, so we'll look at a sale. And that's another reason why we're trying to buy young players, so they've always got sell-on value. It all really, really, really fixes together in the long term. And a lot of people were really, really worried at the start, me included. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, things weren't amazing at the end of the Abramovich era, but we'd been so used to going in, paying big money for the best players, the best managers, just get them in the team, and ultimately leaving that to be future Chelsea's problem when things go wrong. But what is happening now, and we're starting to see it after a few years, is these initial setups and these difficult periods we'd been through, finishing 12th and then 6th. You know, we've just won 2 trophies and we're looking at a really, really strong squad and there's so much buzz and the fan base is absolutely loving it. Things look like they're going to start to be being better, and ultimately they've kind of stuck to the plan. Do you know what I mean? They only deviated from that plan in that first transfer window when Todd Boehly was like, let's get Koulibaly and Sterling and pay him 300 grand a week and hopefully that'll do. And, you know, got to give it to Igbali, man. He came in and said, no, we're going to buy young players, we're going to do this. And at the beginning, it's always going to be difficult because that mass amount of change is always going to be really tough to navigate. Enzo Maresca, I'm not sold on him. Do you know what I mean? I am excited by what he's doing, but it is impossible to compare someone like Enzo Maresca to someone like Pep Guardiola, for instance, because he's got that much more development to do. But at the end of the day, Arteta went and did really well at Arsenal, and they had a couple of really low finishes before they started competing. Do you know what I mean? This is Enzo Maresca's second season. Do you know something I realised today? I barely talk about Maresca at all. I might do a bit of a deep dive on him in another video because, you know, my opinion on Maresca is squarely, he didn't have a huge amount of experience, so it was a gamble, but he is proving after one season that he has got something about him. Now he's been given all of these players and, you know, his tactical structure has kind of been indented a bit more into the team. I guess next season is going to be a massive season to see whether Maresca is the guy to take us forward or not. So, in summary, we've really just been talking about kind of 2 players in this one. Garnacho, ultimatums, do you know what I mean? You know, I am unsure where I sit on that. I like it and don't like it at the same time for different reasons. So that's a bit of a weird one. And the Xavi Simons thing, we'll have to see what happens and how much Man City ramp up their interest in him. If they come and try and hijack and swoop after we've been spending all this time negotiating for him, that'd be a bit of a nightmare, but we will just have to see what happens. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for sticking around until the end of the video. If you did, I will keep my ear to the ground for more Chelsea news as always. I hope you're all having a wicked day and I will catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.